So first of all, let me start by saying thank you for attending the webinar regarding the upcoming changes to WSIB in January 2020. As members of NACCB, it's really important to keep everybody up to date on these changes that may affect your rates next year. We invited John Young and his team to provide us an overview of the changes and really what can we do to help potentially mitigate the risks. At the same time, I also wanted to just, before we get started, to provide a brief overview and update of what's been going on over the last couple of months with our government relations program. It has been extremely busy over the last few months, working with our new partner, Strategy Corp. Once we landed Strategy Corp was going to be our partner going forward, we met with them to really focus on what and how to develop a clear message to the government. And we landed on two really specific areas to focus on, which was one, the ESA legislation 74.3 as it pertains to independent contractors. And of course, this hot button topic, WSIB. As some of you are aware or may not be aware, the government put together a task force about a month or two back. And this task force, which was named ORAC, the Ontario Work Recovery Advisory Committee, was to really focus on economic recovery after COVID. And its mandate is strengthening Ontario's economic position and supporting workers. So we felt from the very beginning, we were uniquely aligned to really help and support this mandate. As members, I think you all received a copy last month, but we did develop and provided a submission to ORAC, which was submitted, I think, back last month, mid-July. After that, we were also invited to some roundtable sessions with committee members, really to discuss Ontario's competitiveness around such things as infrastructure, attracting and retaining talent, and broadband access across the province. The group, or a number of us, were actually invited to speak directly with ORAC committee about our specific positions around those two issues. So Catherine Tremblay from Altus HR and Alex McKenzie also joined me for that session. This week, we've actually been invited to meet with the Minister of Labor's office to discuss, again, these two key issues. So that's kind of some of the things that we've been doing over the last 2 months. There are a number of meetings that we will be happening in the fall with a number of different, both bureaucrats, politicians, from the red tape, from the Premier's office, from the the Minister of Labor's office as well. So lots of things. I'm going to be trying to get as many people involved in those discussions. To be perfectly honest, in many cases, we're only allowed to bring 2 or 3 people to those calls, but where there's much more opportunity to bring more members, I will try and do so. So I'll keep everybody up to date on what's happening there. So that's just kind of a quick update. We are going to be holding kind of a Q&A session at the end. So I just wanted to, if we could just leave any questions pertaining to that at that point, because I wanted to really focus and give John and Bob as much time as possible for their session today. So why don't we get started on our webinar? One quick piece, though, I will say with regards to some making sure that we understand how obviously we'll run the session. We're placing everybody on mute. And so if you have any questions during the webinar, we will be checking the chat room. And so we will periodically stop, put a pause, ask those questions, and then continue on. At the same time, there is, as I mentioned, a time 15 minutes allocated at the end for some Q&A with whomever. So let's start, if we can get started. I'll start with introductions. Bob, we'll start with John Young's team. So Bob White, 25 years of experience with IBM in management positions of increasing responsibility and 20 years in management consulting. First as an associate partner of Accenture and subsequently in VP positions at Capgemini, Celerant, and FMR. He's got a unique combination of general management, sales, and technical skills with a successful track record in both product and service sectors. And I think many of you know John Young already. He's a paralegal with John Young Professional Corporation. Some or many have worked with John previously in the past on WSIB matters, especially including audits. He had worked for WSIB for 21 years, and over the last 20 years, he's been really focusing in his efforts on helping companies with legal services and navigating the ever-changing WSIB field. So I'm going to pass it over to you two gentlemen to get started.
And thank you all for this privilege to address you regarding these issues of importance and the big changes coming. What we're going to do, as you know, is walk through an agenda. Let me jump right into that because you have that in front of you on the notes from Helena. And so what I'll do is I'll jump right into the common ground. Mike had mentioned that he had made a representation to the Ontario Workforce Recovery Advisory Committee. And John had been asked in doing some work with another client to do a similar submission. And so these are the bullets that John had put in front of that organization for their consideration and to try and position what it really means to have a knowledge professionals and contract for knowledge industry and business line within the overall Ontario economy. And at the risk of insulting your intelligence, what I'm going to do is to point you over to a picture, which could be worth 1,000 words. But this picture is very helpful in helping people understand that the skills that are required during the requirements phase of a large project are very different than the skills required during the design phase, and again, very different than during the implementation phase. And then, of course, when you get into running whatever the big project is, the effect of that and the outcome, you need different skills again, because they're more in the maintenance mode and keeping it going. And over top of that project curve, there's also the change management agenda, which can be as much as 40% on top of the project curve, again, in terms of cost and resources. But really, if you spend less than 40% on top of those various elements in the project curve, if you spend less than 40% on change management, the outcome will probably not be sustainable. So a couple of things I'd like to highlight here is down in bullet 6, the development work required for a given project is, completed and the new way of doing things is implemented. But the labor required to operate and maintain the new approach is significantly less than during the development. And that's preaching to the converted, I know, because this is your business. But nonetheless, when talking to the ORAC people, this might not have been as familiar to them as it is to you. So we were trying to position a common ground, if I could, with this information. And we also wanted them to know that once the projects are completed, bullet 8, that the professional contractors move on to other projects and other companies. And in this manner, their experience, skills, and experience are matched up to new clients and need of the temporary employment agencies. And you are supplying those needs for those various big projects. But we've been hearing some things in the marketplace that we thought we would just share with you, and I thought it's worthwhile to at least make sure that we're in agreement on this one as well. The WSIB is focused on this supply of knowledge worker industry as being under insured in certain industries. In other words, they're tracking what's happening in cases by industry and finding out that it doesn't make sense to insure people based on their skill set, but it makes more sense to insure people on what industry they're working in within various skill sets. So the entirely new premise is on industry served versus professional skills supplied ratings. And that's the big change. It'll impact costs and margins, obviously not telling you anything you don't know, but making sure we're on the same foundation. And the other thing that'll happen is likely you will have to change your fee structure in order to stay whole. Skipping one, but the next one down, because of this, the WSIB appeals on ratings cases and penalties imposed for non-companies is obvious, non-compliance rather, is obviously increasing. And the other thing we're finding is that if I can just draw your attention to the graphic down at the bottom right-hand corner there, there's always at least 3 agendas in everything that's happening, not only in families, but also in business. There's obviously the rational agenda, the business reasons for it. There's the political agenda, which when I say political, I mean somewhat of what it means to the organization, what it means to another organization is very different. And then there's the personal agenda or the emotional agenda. And what we're often finding out when the appellants themselves actually try to pursue an appeal on their own initiative, the emotional agenda takes over, and a vested interest in a specific outcome is not always contributing to the right result that you would like to have, for the simple reason that the emotional agenda becomes very important. And that's very understandable. And so there is a benefit to having an intermediary or another party looking after your interest on some of these appeals. And we'll be talking about that one a little bit later. John, I'm going to turn it over to you so that you can talk the team through this slide as well.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Just as a way of a little introduction from me, I've been doing these appeals now. The first one was in 2005 for your industry sector. And I've been impressed with quite a few things over the past 16 years. One of which is the level of cooperation in your industry. I have been most impressed with that. The second thing I would say is, and I'm not going to repeat everything Robert said, but the extremely necessary and practical way that your industry provides professional contractors at the appropriate time, and while they are high paid, it is done in a very, in my opinion, cost-effective manner, where, as shown on Robert's curve, these people come in when their skill set is necessary, and they're gone when you enter the maintenance field, part of the project. So to me, I've been very impressed with the business model, and I think it's extremely valuable to the Ontario economy. And with the contractors and what they are paid, it's got to far exceed what we used to hear about the automotive sector, where one automotive sector worker would support 10 other people in the economy. And your sector, the people are higher paid than even in the automotive sector. And the government, it needs to be impressed on the government that the service provided is really essential to the Ontario economy. So I don't know whether the WSIB did not get the memo that is the case, but as I'm sure all are aware, they brought in a new classification model as of January 2020. Now, they didn't publish the premium rates until September of 2019, at what point it was really, I'm going to say in quotes, too late to for the industry to sort of get on the board's case and get anything changed before 2020. Although there was a successful lobby to freeze the premium rates for 2020, and that has been extended for 2021. The premium rate applicable to the supply of management consultants, information technology consultants, and a lot of consulting professionals in that type of business in 2019, the premium rate was 13 cents, or 0.13% of the insurable earnings that your business would report to the WSIB. Now, for large firms in your industry, that was maybe a lot of money. And we've done a number of appeals for those firms, successful. And we've done appeals for smaller firms that have been successful. But a lot of smaller firms, when the premium rate was 13 cents, they weren't overly concerned about the cost. A lot of businesses in your sector were concerned that if the WSIB considered the contractors to be your employees or workers, that they may extend that to CPP, EI, et cetera, and just those costs would have been prohibitive. But the WSIB premium costs per worker were about $120, $125 a year maximum. So that's where we sort of started from. The WSIB has been forced to hold the rates for 2020 and 2021 at 12 cents. In our interaction with WSIB management, they are planning to go to the full-blown new classification scheme rating as of 2022. And we'll start with, this is the first time ever. It's not done for any other industry, but your own in-house office staff, the people that run your business, they are classified under Class M. And right now, we haven't seen the 2022 premium rates yet, but right now, the rate that the board wants to impose for 2020 and 2021 was $1.67. So you were paying 13 cents for your in-house people in 2019. If the WSIB had its way, you would have already been paying $1.67 for 2020 and 2021. Now, we haven't heard what this is going to be for 2022, but it's going to be in that order of magnitude. Now, I'm not covering some of these things as if you don't know them. I'm sure a lot of people do know them. But just to sort of, give you the situation where it stands right now. And I am myself extremely concerned for the industry. Now, there are other types of supply of labor businesses that this is not, the new scheme is not like it's going to hit you. It's perhaps even an improvement over what they had in 2019. For example, if you supplied truck drivers, premium rate for trucking was $4.88 in 2019, and your in-house people would have to, the premiums on them would also be calculated at the $4.88 premium rate. But this is the kind of thing that concerns me. The classification scheme previously in effect, people were classified based on similarity of business activity. But if you look at where your in-house people are classified in 2020, 21, and going forward, that's shown in the box on the right hand of the page at the top, and the little voice box there. These classifications are high risk and do not align with the work you do. So included in your category are security guards, armored car services, exterminating and pest control, window cleaning, et cetera, et cetera. So I just wanted to very briefly give you an idea on some of the situations there. I won't go through them all, but let's just look at, for example.
Well, I think we could point out Class L, I think, because that's a direct example. We provide professional staffing Professional staffing can include, obviously information technology, business professionals, legal, etc. Our clients, as well as competitors, such as the Deloitte's, the Price Waterhouse, are considered under Class L, computer systems, design, and related services. So there's a nuance here between that grouping and Class M, where staffing companies are classified. And that's the real issue there.
Right. So the Class L classification, to me, while I don't like the 31-cent premium rate applicable to your industry sector, it would be a far, far better and fairer classification than Class M or classification according to what your client does. So that's one thing that, I think in advocating for your industry, and this is something that, is being raised with the Ministry of Labor and that Ontario Workforce Recovery Advisory Committee is, perhaps the professional, scientific, and technical category would be the one that would be better suited to the supply of management consultants, information technology people, and whoever else you might supply as a professional that works in an office. But I wanted to focus, first of all, on what's in the Class M, okay? Because this is horrific. You're getting the same rating for your own in-house people as if you look at waste collection, for example. Well, that includes garbage. It includes getting rid of radioactive waste, and it includes dead stock removal. Cattle or horses or any kind of livestock that die. There's companies that remove that. That's the same rating that's being applied to the supply of knowledge professionals, which to me is just absolutely horrific. And some of the other categories maybe aren't quite so bad as far as the rating goes. But for example, landscaping is in there. And in 2019, the rate was $3.82. So they're laughing at $1.67, but your industry is horrified. Now, getting on to the lower chart, not only do your own in-house people attract $1.67, but whoever you supply to your clients, this is the first time ever the board has done this. Your industry was brought under compulsory coverage in 1963, and it was put in as supply of clerical labor. They got the same rate as architects. Now, architects are in Class L now under the new scheme. So for 1963 to 2019, it was always a clerical rating. It ran around 40 cents. It gradually worked its way down, 21 cents, 19 cents. And then in 2019, it got all the way down to 13 cents. Now, a lot of your industry supplies people to the three levels of government: municipal, provincial, and federal. And that is covered under Class D2 public administration. And they want to charge you $3.50 for supplying clerical people that are professionals to the government. Now, that is so ridiculous because the government, municipal, federal, and provincial, do not pay, at least do not automatically pay, premiums to the WSIB. They don't have Schedule 1 account. They don't report their earnings. They don't have a premium rate. They don't have a classification. They don't pay premiums. So the WSIB has done an artificial, surreal classification of the government and given it Class D2 with a $3.50 rate that they want you to pay on whoever you supply to the three levels of government. so I don't want to dwell on it, but the 3 levels of government are covered on an automatic or compulsory basis under Schedule 2, where they pay what their claims cost. So if they have no claims, they pay nothing to the WSIB. If a claim costs $1 million, they pay the WSIB $1 million, which is the capitalized value of the claim, plus whatever the administration rate is for their particular type of organization. And administration rates can be 14, 15, they've been as high as 31%. But the ridiculous thing here is you may have a client that has no claims, you supply them labor, clerical labor that you used to pay 13 cents on, now you have to pay $3.50. I don't know how they account for where the premiums would go from that, but you are overfunding the WSIB system by that. I think we'll leave that slide now, Robert. There may be some questions, but we'll go on to the next one. So another issue we have come across is, and you see on the far left-hand side of your screen, this is what the WSIB e-clearance facility looks like when you look up an employer. And the WSIB sent out a questionnaire in, I believe it was January 2019. Many of my clients contacted me and said they never received the questionnaire. How they came up with the fact that there was a questionnaire, I don't know. But some contacted me, how do I fill it out? What do I say? That kind of thing. And what they were looking for there were who were the clients of firms in your industry. They then would assign the classes applicable to your clients. So you end up with multiple classifications on your account beside the class M, okay? And then if you see, there's the classification and description. Class M, it's hard to read here, but administration, services to buildings, that kind of thing. And if you look down below, the NACCB code that goes with it was for temporary help services. But if you didn't file a questionnaire with the WSIB, the default action by the WSIB was to assign the highest possible rated classification in their new scheme, which was class G3 for foundation, foundation work for buildings, okay? And so that's, and I see a number of accounts that still have that class G3 classification on their e-clearance account details. Now that should be fixed, especially going into 2022, if you go to the full-blown rates that the board wants to go to, because class G3 is $4.45, or 4.45% of your insurable earnings. So you want to get it based on your clients, as Michael just referenced, class L for professional services. That's anybody that's doing software development and they've taken the contracts to do that. You can at least get some of your payroll at a 31-cent rate for class L. So that's something that you should get taken care of. We can help you with that if you want. I have clients that are having very significant problems even in 2020 and 2021 because the WSIB has already penalized them by applying the new scheme premium rates. So they are already paying the $3.50 rate when they supply to government. They're already paying another large sector that your industry supplies is finance and insurance. So the banks, insurance companies, they're imposing a, I think it's class K, and the premium rate is 90 cents. Now, I'm hoping that those listening today are paying the 12-cent rate. If you're not, then that needs to be addressed. And I'll just mention in passing on the finance and insurance sector, the banks and insurance companies were under the same category as you were in 2019. They were paying 13 cents. At 13 cents, because both finance and insurance do not have to have WSIB coverage, they didn't register. They did not take out WSIB coverage. The banks have fought it ever since there's been a WCB, WSIB. Insurance companies, they don't want it either at 13 cents. At 90 cents, it is absolutely no desire on the part of that sector to get WSIB coverage. So what I want to point out there as well, the government is covered on a compulsory basis at all three levels under Schedule 2. But banks and insurance companies, they can apply for coverage. It's voluntary, but if they don't apply for coverage, they don't have to have WSIB coverage at all. It is not legally required. So if you look at any of the banking companies, you look up their names on the WSIB website, they do not have WSIB accounts. They're not paying WSIB premiums. But if you put your people into a bank or insurance company, the WSIB wants to charge you premiums at 90 cents for every $100 of insurable earnings. So again, that is a completely artificial construct for generating premiums for the WSIB. Now, the last slide that I'll speak to here, I don't know how I'm doing for time, but hopefully it's not been too long.
You're fine. John, if I could just mention before you go on,
yeah.
Also just the implementation of these changes. If you take a look across the board, they're being kind of rolled over the next 3 years for all organizations, except for the staffing company. So those premiums would increase by 5 or 10% over the next 2 to 3 years, versus the staffing industry is going to get hit immediately come 2022. And so again, it seems to be a very targeted approach to this industry, which is obviously unfair.
That's very good, Michael. A very good point. Now, I don't want to be all negative Nelly here. There has been ripple information going around that the board may come in with some mollifying, effect to help your segment of the supply of labor industry. I don't know, but that is being, Michael's already talked about the NACCB is lobbying strongly for, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Michael, but for another rate freeze for 2022 or beyond, until something can be worked out for your industry sector. And I don't want to, give more credit than it's due, but I'm hoping that this government, which is supposed to be business friendly, will get the message, and we will have that kind of assistance from the Ministry of Labor or the government, something imposed on the WSIB to hold the rates again until this can be straightened out, because John, it is an absolute mess. You want to say something further, Mike, on that?
Yeah, what I can say is, on behalf of members, there's a 2 or 3-fold approach that we're taking right now. One, certainly from an association perspective, representing our members, as well as all staffing, this staffing industry, specifically to both the Minister of Labor, WSIB, around this issue. At the same time, we're looking at it from a grassroots perspective and asking all members to participate as well. We provided you, and I know a number of our members wrote letters to the chairwoman and COO of WSIB with regards to what we're asking for, as we are being, it seems, targeted or treated unfairly. But there's really a fourfold approach that we're asking for. The first one is a moratorium on the WSIB rates, because right now the proposed rates are not associated with our industry's historical risk experience and do have adverse consequences on this industry as a whole. We're looking, number two, for an immediate revocation of Section 2.4 of WSIB regulation to ensure that all the staffing firms in Ontario are treated fairly for the purposes of classification and rate setting. We're also asking for the WSIB to correctly align our industry to Class L, which is that professional, scientific, and technical, where many of our competitors / clients are already classified. And then for WSIB to implement the above suggestions with a rate transition plan that doesn't allow any staffing agencies to increase by more than 5% per year, just so that we can implement this over time and work with our clients on these types of initiatives. So these are the things that we are asking the WSIB for on behalf of our members and the staffing industry as a whole. Thanks, John.
Excellent, Michael, excellent. I just want to make a couple of comments before we get into this WSIB to be pending, okay? So one of my clients contacted the president's office of the WSIB and was shuffled down to operations, and one of the senior people in the employer service center, and this is a guy I've dealt with in the past, and I think he's a decent man, but his comment was, it's time we just got on with full-blown implementation. So he didn't seem too keen to do anything about this, but he's not in a policy or organization level decision-making role. He's in a frontline operations role. But there's been so much negative feedback to the board from this sector. Why they haven't got the message yet, I don't know, but there's just an example of one of my clients ran into. So there was another thought I had which just escaped me, but let's just move through this. So if you had 100 employees, okay, in 2019 you'd pay premiums of about $13,000, okay. The annual maximum, it's been slightly lower, but it's around $100,000 now for each worker that you have, worker employee. For the same 100 people, if you have 100 in your office, I realize smaller companies would have less, but if you have 100 in your office still in 2022, the 13,000 goes to 167,000 for WSIB coverage. Now, the one thing I wanted to mention, that's a 1,200% increase. The one thing I wanted to mention that what's been yapped out by the WSIB to individual employers and in publications is the new pricing model takes into consideration what your claim cost and experience has been, very similar to the old experience rating plan, which was a retroactive or retrospective experience rating plan. The new experience rating is prospective. So while the rate for Class M at $1.67 is the standard rate for that class, if you have a good record, that rate would be reduced. In other words, a good claim cost, claims experience record. But the reality is that it's going to be a minimal impact on the premium rates. And the smaller your business, the smaller the assistance of that experience rating impact on your premium rate. And just commenting a little further on what Michael just said, We've looked at the claims experience of many, many firms in your sector for the last 15 years that I've been handling appeals for the sector. And some have zero WSIB claim costs in their entire history. The vast majority have claims costs of in the hundreds of dollars. And there might be a rare exception here or there where the claims costs are up to, still below 5%. Now I have clients that have paid hundreds of thousands of dollars in WSIB premiums under the 13-cent premium rate, and the payout for claims is less than $1,000 in their entire history. So at 13 cents, the industry was already subsidizing all the other previous, I think it was 9 classes and 254 rate groups under the old scheme. Once you move to $1.67 for your own in-house people, or the premium rates applicable to your clients, that is just free money going into the WSIB. It's called the accident fund. That will subsidize every industry that is covered under Schedule 1 of the Workplace Safety and Insurance Act. So getting into just the examples we have here, the government in 2019 for 100 people, you're paying 13 grand again. In 2022, you'd be paying, if you have 100 contractors or personnel or employees or whatever you have, if they're placed with municipal, provincial, federal government, the premiums would be $350,000. Now, I have heard from clients that the premium rates that are going to be imposed will shut down their business. Their profit margin will be gone. There's no point in doing it. Now, Robert White alluded to the fact that you'd have to adjust your pricing model with the client. If this goes ahead, you're going to have to adjust your pricing model, and your clients are going to have to accept the fact that you're going to be charging higher amounts for the labor you supply. I think that's ridiculous, but that may be necessary. One other comment I'd make here is you have a Crown Corporation, the WSIB, that reports to the Ministry of Labor, and they have an effect, just because it's going to have to happen. If they go to this model, they're going to be gouging money out of other arms of the government, other government ministries, agencies, and Crown corporations, because this is not a cost to the WSIB. There's no cost to the WSIB from any government ministry, any government agency, any Crown corporation, because they're already paying the cost of their own claims under Schedule 2, whatever the costs are, they're paying it. They put a deposit with the board. It works different from Schedule 1 where you folks are. So it's one little Crown corporation off to the side making hay out of all the other government agencies. It's just ridiculous. So for financial services, that's the banks and the insurance companies. Again, 100 people would have cost $13,000 in WSIB premiums. We don't have any information whether that's going to go up. Okay, I mean, I would sincerely hope it goes down. We don't have the 2022 rates yet. And another large sector that your industry provides people to is the telecom industry. And again, that you paid $13,000 for 100 people in 2019, approximately, and that's going to be almost triple or 300% increase in 2022 as things currently stand. So that's really all I wanted to say, aside from I'll just mention this. Right now, there is, aside from the lobbying efforts, what the NACCB is doing, and what individual firms are doing to complain to the Ministry of Labor and Government. People are going to the small business, Ministry of Small Business as well. The other thing you can do, and what you can't do anything about the Class M at $1.67. Individual employers cannot lobby the WSIB change my classification when it very clearly specifies that if you supply labor that meet the clerical criteria, you can't say to them, well, you have me in Class M, I should be in Class L. Okay, they'll come back and say, well, the what is it called? The NACCB classification scheme puts you in this category, and we have no choice but to leave you in Class M. And the same thing goes for the classes where you supply labor. But what you can do is, if you have professional knowledge contractors, is you can get a ruling from the WSIB that these individuals, these contractors, are independent operators, so you don't have to report their earnings nor pay premiums on their earnings. They can go get their own WSIB coverage if they're ruled to be independent operators, so it does not have a negative impact on the contractor. If they want coverage, they can get it. If they don't want it, they don't have to have it. But you would not have to report their earnings, and you would not have to pay premiums on their earnings. Now, that's what I have been doing to a large extent for your industry since 2005. We have had about 30 cases, and we have successfully obtained rulings of independent operator status on every single case at one level of appeal or another. And there are 3 levels of appeal: back to operations, to the appeal services division, both are within the WSIB, and then externally to the appeal tribunal if necessary. We had to go to the appeals tribunal when we first started doing this. We now have a number of cases there. You can look at my website. You can see some of that, some of those rulings. We also obtain rulings of independent operator status from the appeals branch, which is now the appeal services division within the WSIB. I'm not thrilled with what we've been encountering since 2015, when 2 new appeals resolution officers came on the scene. We have not had any of cases from your industry go to the WSIB's appeal services division, so I don't know what they'll rule in that instance. But I'm not impressed with the 2 new appeals resolution officers. Anyway, and the other thing is that lately, and we're probably at 10 or 15 cases where we obtained independent operator status rulings from the WSIB operations area, whether that was employer audit services, now the compliance, audit compliance branch, whatever they call it, and also the employer service center. They've been ruling lately that at the first level of appeal that our request was granted, and the contractors are ruled independent operators. And I'll just mention that the WSIB's policy on premium adjustments is absolutely clear as a bell. And if you get a ruling of independent operator status, we should be able to recover your premiums for 3 prior years. Okay, so in 2021, that's the current year. You're entitled, if you get a ruling in 2021, you're entitled to your premiums back on your contractors for 2021. You should also be able to get them back for 2020, 2019, and 2018. The WSIB is being extremely obstinate, and despite their own policy, is refusing to give back the money for prior years that's been paid on contractor earnings, and saying that it's only effective as of the year they issue the ruling that your contractors are independent operators. We are in the middle of appealing a number of those decisions. We have 2 appeals resolution officer decisions from prior to 2015, where the appeals resolution officer completely destroyed the argument as to why the adjustment should not be made retroactively. So those decisions are very supportive of independent operator status being made effective as far back as the policy allows. It was 2 years when that appeals resolution officer made those decisions, and the new policy says 3 years. So if necessary, we will take those cases to the appeals tribunal, and I'm really hoping that they consider it a good idea to stick a finger in the eye of the WSIB and grant those appeals. The appeals tribunal takes a very dim view of a lot of WSIB decisions. So, it is a very fair level of review at the external appeals tribunal. So, Robert, that's all I would comment on those 3 slides to this point. And of course, there may be some questions later on.
Thanks, John. I'll just change gears then if I can a little bit. My role at Accenture when I was hired there was to grow the SAP practice. We had 9 people with SAP skills, and we wanted to grow that and make that become a significant portion of our business. And in fact, we were more successful than we could have imagined, because within 2.5 years, we had that, 3 years actually, we had that up to 500 people. So my job with Accenture was to sell the work. And so we did very large SAP projects. Thanks to you, we were using your resources and staff to shore up our skills until we were able to build our own skills. And that's the way Accenture operated at the time. So I tried to think about these changes as it might affect the business as I knew it, and as it addresses your issues at hand. And maybe this is a little bit of an operational interpretation of what John has been saying, but I just saw incredible pressure on margins. I don't know whether you have a rate card, whether it's a physical one or a virtual one, but now that rate card not only has to be a rate card for your skill set, but a rate card for your skill set within an industry, and in some cases even a rate card for your skill set by client within industry. And so this introduces a level of complexity and the maintenance of some of your internal documents, and constantly incorporating these changes. But the one that was obviously apparent to me was the increased effort in sales effort, going out to your client and telling them, "Hi, how are you? We've got a price increase for you," was never an easy thing to try and sell. And of course, it obviously impacted customer satisfaction. So if you aren't thinking in those terms, those are terms probably that all of us will have to address when this goes through, and as John has mentioned, if it does go through. We wanted to talk to you, though, about a little bit about what we could do, not only collectively, but also do individually. And you have already heard an awful lot of the things that Mike is doing in talking to various government bodies and trying to get the attention of people to realize how ridiculous and how impactful in a negative fashion a number of these decisions are. And that is going directly into the C-levels of, or the strategic thinkers of the WSIB and government bodies and the thought shapers. But there's a number of things that we can do individually, which I think needs to be done in a consistent way, and it needs to be coordinated as well. The particular things are being consistent in our messaging, using some of the things that we pointed out in the earlier slides, making sure that the size of margin impact and overall business impact is made clear, and making lots of noise with people that were listening, particularly MPPs who, seeing an election happen, may feel a little bit that they need to be more involved in things. So it's worthwhile to do that. And the last bullet there is to think about your situation. And if you are going to launch an appeal, it's advisable to do something that John informed me about, which is you can launch a notice of objection that you are going to appeal, that your intent is to appeal. And that puts a stake in the ground that we think is very worthwhile to do if you think you're being negatively affected by all these changes. But I think it really, the bullet on the right-hand side, or the image on the right-hand side, says that it almost needs to be operation overload. There are so many things affecting people's thinking in government and in regulation and in policy these days that messages get lost in the traffic. So this needs to be loud and large, I think, and coordinated. And that's what we had in mind on this chart. So a little bit about us, and I'll say this largely, it's John. I've only recently been trying to help John a little bit out with business development, but John's got a great track record here, but he has a great and unique knowledge, not only about what happens outside of WSIB, but the internal workings of the WSIB, because he's there all the time working on appeals and knowing what the current thinking is. We can get around and through the WSIB and make things happen. And John's got a good track record of correcting some of these disadvantageous classifications and successfully reclassifying and then recovering some of those past premiums that have been paid. And some of them have been pretty large, in millions of dollars as well. So some operational improvement kind of things that we might be able to help you with. Correct some of the past incorrect classifications. Determine in size how your company will be affected by these planned changes. I know you can do that on your own. But at least we've got a little bit of a model for how you might do that one, and we can help you. Or we can recommend proactive initiatives with the WSIB to change how your organization can be effective. And you'll see there at the bottom of them, in addition to the other two, we say file a notice of intent to object, to at least reserve your right to get not only the current year, but the 3 previous years. In addition to that, we're also available to help out providing what I would call advisory services, which is we'll give you our best thoughts. And if you want to do that on your own, we can save you a lot of work on stop, start, and going down the wrong avenue. And we can make some cost avoidance recommendations around that field as well. So if you would prefer to do this on your own, but it is onerous, it is detailed, and it requires some heavy lifting on your part to go back and get the right information that's required. And we can help you just even in identifying the correct information that is most impactful in getting these situations rectified. And I'll leave this one for you to peruse at your own time, but this is about John, not about me, but about John. And you can see that we have a unique insight into both sides of the issue. the WSIB side, but also the outside perspective. So, and very successful in helping out there. So questions that you might like to ask us. We've talked a lot. I think we're pretty much on time. So if you have any questions, we'd like to take them now, or if you want us to handle them one-off, we'll take them then. But the one thing I just passed over before was on the previous slide, sorry, was my coordinates are up there at the top if you want to reach out to me, and then I can schedule meetings for John. But I would like to take any questions you might have right now and address those, and it'll probably be John doing most of the answering.
So what we're going to do, we're going to open up the lines. First of all, there is a question in the chat box, and I'll just kind of, I'll ask on behalf of Alex. This is from Alex from Procom. John, what are your thoughts on us pressing for a standard exception code similar to something like code 8810 in the US for office and clerical roles?
I think that's the kind of solution that, you know, the NACCB, or individual people working through the NACCB, that's the kind of thing, Michael, that I think can be pressed for. There is a category, I'm looking at the presentation slides right now on my screen, but in Class L, there is a designation for computer software development. Okay, that's as an example. There's another category for management consulting. There's a category for accounting. Okay, so those are the types of NAICS codes that I think are much more appropriate for your particular sector. As I mentioned, if you supply truck drivers, you supply construction workers, you supply nurses, you supply restaurant workers, they have always been at the industry rate. So they're not up in arms about what has happened or what's planning to go on under the new WSIB scheme. It is the sector supplying what the WSIB historically has called clerical labor, and that includes all of those professionals. That is the one that is going to be just absolutely slammed, as we pointed out in the presentation. So I think what Alex suggested is a very good idea. You mentioned it, Michael, Class M. Sorry, I always do that. Class L for the professionals, I think, is the right class. And then, you know, the board can pick, or the Ministry of Labor can impose a NAICS code from within Class L. I think that's a great idea. That's what I've sort of advocated. I'm not a lobbyist, so I can't lobby the government, but that's what the NACCB is doing through an official lobbyist. So
I've got a second question here from Matt Calvin. John, what's your advice to organizations who are considering WSIB alternatives, such as occupational accident insurance or creating a captive insurance solution?
Excellent question. I've been asked since this new scheme came in that question many times. Okay, I have been asked that question many times since 1973. Why can't I get private insurance? Okay, so this is going to sound ridiculous. Okay, and my apologies. I also apologize for 20 years of working at the WSIB. What's happening now, I'm not going to take responsibility for. Okay, I've been gone 27 years. So if the industry sector, and that's now down to a business activity, if it is designated as mandatory WSIB coverage, it's a monopoly on the part of the WSIB. You have to have their coverage. You cannot substitute private insurance. Over the years, many firms I've talked to have mandatory WSIB coverage, and they have top-up insurance in the private sector. But the WSIB, and that in this case they are correct according to the act as it is written by the Ontario legislature. The industry where you supply labor of any kind, including clerical labor, coverage is mandatory. So you cannot opt out. You cannot substitute private insurance. Now, the caveat on that is many businesses are misclassified, and the WSIB in their classification scheme draws a very fine line, and it's a very gray area between what is considered supply of clerical labor and what an individual employer might actually be doing. Okay, I'm going to mention IT, Michael. I know you represent more than just IT, but specifically on information technology, and I'm going back to the old scheme. There are provisions in the old classification scheme that would say where you take the contract for the whole IT project, and you have a schedule, deliverables, fixed price contract, and you're responsible for the whole thing, that business activity is, you're delivering a product in the end. That business activity is not covered on a mandatory basis. It is covered on what is called a by application basis. And that is specifically under Class L for professional services. That's that computer software category. So these people are doing the exact same work as what people would be doing that are supplied by the NACCB, just supplied as labor. Yeah, I mean, anybody on the line can correct me if they think I'm wrong, but they're doing software development, they're doing data architecture, they're doing business analysis, they're working with the users, coming up with user requirements. It's all, that's all the same work. And if you just supply professional knowledge contractors to do that, your business is compulsory. If you take the whole project, your business is not compulsory. It's voluntary. It's by application. So in that case, the gentleman's question, you can go out and get private insurance if you so desire, or you don't have to. It's a lot of these projects, there is insurance requirements in the contracts, but that's errors and omissions and general liability, that kind of thing. But you can go out and get accidental death and dismemberment, accident and sickness policies, but that's only if your business has been designated as a computer consulting business. The same thing would apply, by the way, for a management consulting business. If you take the overall contract to do a management consulting project, whether that's changing the corporate culture at a business or whatever it is, that is not mandatory. That is by application or voluntary. But if you supply a management consultant, that is supply of labor, and that is compulsory. I'm not saying I agree with this, by the way. That's just the way it is.
John, I got another question for you. This is from Garrett Irvin. Hey, John, we understand the rates for external contractors are set to jump to the class rates on January 1st. Will the same happen for internal Class M employees, or is there a transition cap on increases?
My understanding from one of the managers at the WSIB is Class M is going to $1.67, or whatever they designate as the correct rate for 2022. The premium rates, as I mentioned, are affected by the claims cost for individual employers, but they're also impacted. There's no one, well, the WSIB claims there's no unfunded liability. Okay, I don't believe that. I believe the rates are going to go up because I don't know how they automatically, or however they did it, got rid of the unfunded liability. I don't believe it, but the premium rates will go up or down depending on what happened in that class. They will now have experience for 2020 and 21 as well. And one thing I should mention, I didn't mention it in passing on the slides, but I have clients that already have the new class structure on their account, including the classes and the NACCB codes that go with them. They're still paying 12 cents, but I have a number of clients with 25 plus classifications. And that speaks to what Robert mentioned. You now have to cost by all the classes applicable to your clients and by, you know, the classes that are assigned to your clients. And there might be multiple clients in a given class. You have to factor all that in. Now, I understand clients have been able to work that out with computer systems, but it's still a nightmare as far as I'm concerned for administration. But Class M, the last we've heard, is going to $1.67 in 2022, or whatever the adjusted premium rate is based on 2020 and 22 experience. And they're tracking that now according to the classes that have been assigned to temporary employment agency accounts. So that will affect, you know, what the rates will be.
John, I got another question here for you from Addie Lou. We send temp workers to the banks. The current rate is 13 cents, obviously, but projected Class K for internal staff and Class M for temps. Is this reasonable?
That's exactly right what the person said. Are they saying, is it reasonable? Are they asking me if it's reasonable?
Correct.
I don't think it's reasonable. I think it's horrendous. I think it's extremely punitive. And I'm not commenting on why this has happened, but it's to me it's extremely damaging to the sector. I'm actually just very, very glad that NACCB and you know, you've got lobbyists working on this, because and my understanding is when this was brought to the attention of the Minister of Labor and other government officials, they all said, what are you talking about? WSIB rates went down. You know, this is impossible. And meanwhile, you're looking at a 2,600% increase in premium rates for supplying people to the government. They were completely unaware of this.
Another question from Barry Dowdle. How do you get independent operator status for incorporated subcontractors?
That's what we do. I don't want to sound too pushing my own agenda here, but we go through a process of collecting what they call organization test questionnaires and other documentation that we believe supports independent operator status. And then we make a submission to the WSIB and we push them as hard as we can to give us the ruling we want. I should mention as well that historically we have been able to get what we call a blanket ruling that all of an employer's contractors are independent operators. And that is a reasonable, rational approach. The WSIB now wants to issue individual contractor rulings. So that's just the height of ridiculous. The clients I've worked with, I don't know of any where different contracts are used for individual contractors. They all use the same written agreement. We submit a sample, 10 to 15% of the contractor population. If you have 100, just for example, 100 contractors, I prefer to be, that's getting into a small number. I prefer to be over 15%. And they are all using the same written agreement. They're working under the same terms and conditions. I'm not talking about the role or the hourly rate, but the same terms and conditions. And the WSIB, say you file 20 questionnaires, the board rules 20 individual rulings, and then says we have to submit individual packages for every other contractor if we want them to be ruled independent operators. So I've been back and forth with one of the managers there, and you know, we have to sort of arrange beforehand that we're looking for a blanket ruling, and I'm hoping we can get them to move into that kind of a model, because I have one client. We got a ruling, I forget what year it was. I think it might have been 2006, that their contractors were independent operators. And unbeknownst to me, they kept on filing organization test questionnaires. They filed 12. They were all, again, ruled to be independent operators, which is wonderful. I wouldn't have gone to that bother. It makes me angry that the WSIB would even think of requiring that. The 13th one they filed, same written agreement, same terms and conditions. They ruled that they were an employee or worker. So we pushed back, appealed that, and got that overturned. But it's what you got to do. You got to push back all the time, because the WSIB is, you get a different decision out of each and every account specialist you deal with.
John, I got another question. How feasible would it be to split internal employees into two classes based on whether they support M for supply of labor or L SOW deliverable-based services?
I don't know if the person can tell you. There is a provision in the policy where if you are doing some of that contract work, where you take the contract for the whole project, and by the way, that's a fight. I've been fighting a couple of instances of that where the WSIB doesn't want to change its mind. They're saying it's supply of labor, even though it is taking the contract and should qualify for software development in Class L. But if the question is, if you have the temporary employment services is one arm of the business, and you also take projects for the overall project where you're responsible for the whole thing, you absolutely should be able to get two classifications for your in-house people. Where you support the temporary employment agency part of the business, that would be in Class M. Where your services are entirely dedicated to Class L, professional people, that should be, you should be able to get that at Class L. There are a whole bunch of hurdles to jump over there, but we certainly can help people get through that.
Great. I just sent a note to everybody. If anybody has any other questions, we're going to try and wrap this up as we're getting close to the 1 o'clock.
If I might just interject, one of the things from a bidding standpoint, RFPs all demand that whoever the primary bidder is, when you're taking full responsibility for the project, even then, the RFP specifies that you have to submit a WSIB certificate. And that's in almost every case across the board that my familiarity, and I dealt cross-industry quite a bit. So it's not just government, but almost every industry participant on an RFP is asking for the WSIB certificate from the primary bidder.
Great. Well, look, listen, I don't see any more questions right now. So let's just take a few minutes, first of all, to thank Bob and John. Thanks for coming in here and educating our members as to where we are today. And obviously this has been somewhat changing over time, and we're hoping that we're going to put a full court press over the fall and really get them to open their eyes and ears about what's happening and how this will affect our industry. I know that certainly Catherine Tremblay had met with the chairwoman, and she was extremely supportive and understood that these changes were going to have a detrimental effect specifically on her business, and certainly what that would do to our industry overall. So I think it's really important that we are now very focused over the fall session to get our messages heard, to meet with the necessary politicians, bureaucrats, to really try and at least at minimum to put some kind of moratorium on this so we can have further discussions. We'll see what happens. We're trying to do our best. There's been a lot of changes and turnover at WSIB, so we're having to start fresh in some cases with relationships, messaging, etc. But anyways, I just wanted to thank you both for coming in. It's really important that we keep everybody, our members, educated. And if there are any questions, please, by all means, reach out to myself or Helena. We'll get those messages over to, or questions over to John and Bob, and we'll get those answers back to you.